had the chance to visit the northeast a couple of years ago, and it's very interesting because it's a different type of occupation to the one in the northwest with the former Jabhat al-Nusra and the one in the south, which the Israelis occupy now. It's a different sort of occupation. It's quite fragile, if you ask me. The Syrian state exists, although you see these maps with yellow areas because it's supposedly controlled by the Kurdish groups. In reality, none of the cities and very few of the major towns are majority Kurdish or held by the Kurds. But that group has some weight there because the US military backs it up. But the US military is mainly concerned about trying to divide the Syrians from the Iraqis and the Iranians and trying to disrupt the connections between them. You know, there's this phobia that you read about in US intelligence and Israeli intelligence magazines they call an Iranian land bridge, which is the idea that Tehran would have access through Iraq, through Syria to the Mediterranean. And the great fear of the Israelis is that would present a united, as they call, axis of resistance here and a threat to the occupation of Palestine. But it's also, in counter-hegemonic terms, it's something that would be a great benefit to the region because really the integration in terms of transport, commerce and communications and so on would be a great boon to the region, is what's being held back because of this policy of divide and rule, basically.
Could I get your assessment of Iran's role and particularly what is going on in Palestine right now? How does that fit into this broader picture that you paint?
Yeah, Iran's role is very important. And what's not well understood in the West is that while Iran has this religious ideology and their obsession is this idea of Islamic civilization, they're building their moral force with Islamic civilization, that doesn't transmit to its alliances in the region. For example, in Palestine, and Iran is the major sponsor of the Palestinian resistance, all of the factions, not just Hamas, but Hamas is the leading faction in Gaza at the moment. They're, of course, all Sunni Muslims in Palestine. There's hardly any Shia Muslims there. So this is something that crosses those sort of stereotypes that are thrown up in the West about a Shia crescent and the idea of Iran being some sort of evangelical movement there. But nevertheless, it's the most important, the largest independent state in this region. It's committed to allying itself with and defending the other independent states and independent peoples and building these international alliances too, without evangelizing its religious ideology. So I think Iran is going to be the most important state in this region and transmitting some of the benefits of the new multilateral groups like the BRICS, for example, because it already has strong strategic alliances with China and Russia, and it's developing strategic alliances in Latin America too. So it's shown a great deal of flexibility in foreign policy, and I don't think that's often recognized in Western media. I think that's something that's an overarching factor, that the growth of BRICS, that's going to influence this region. But Iran's going to remain central to this region in terms of being the single largest independent state with great capacity, with very strong political will, quite a stable government, despite what some of the US media says. They've made great advances in education and health, in human development generally, and that's flowed through into a level of industrialization, which means that Iran is one of those states that began as dependent on oil exports and now is relatively diversified in terms of industrialization, basically. So it isn't in the trap that some of those oil economies are. You know, the fact they don't have any agriculture, they don't have any industry really. They rely on the rents from fossil fuels. Iran has still it's important, its energy exports, but nevertheless it's developing other sectors quite rapidly.
And yet Ansar Allah has taken this position that they are effectively carrying out a humanitarian blockade of the Red Sea, and the United States and the West hasn't actually been able to stop that. But this is, in my opinion, kind of direct contrast to a lot of other Arab states in the region, which have quietly or tacitly accepted, or even in some ways kind of supported the Israeli efforts in Lebanon, Syria, and Gaza. What have you made of the reactions and the responses of other Arab states to Israel's attack on Gaza since October 7th?
Well, of course, it's been a huge disappointment to the Palestinian people and many of the independent Arab peoples and Arab states here that the very wealthy Arab states in the Persian Gulf have really never done very much. They've thrown a bit of money, but they've really done very little to help the Palestinian people. It's been the Persians, the Iranians that have been helping the Palestinian people, and then now more recently, as you say, the Yemenis. Also, of course, Hezbollah, the resistance group in South Lebanon, which has drawn away very large parts of the Israeli military from Gaza throughout the last 8 months, basically.
آنچه در مورد ما میگویند